That's it. We should be live.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you, officers. Welcome along to our meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee this evening. We have 12 items on our agenda to get through. By way of introduction, start with a bit of good news. Again, today, for the second week in a row, the COVID infection rate across the borough has come down again, which is heading in the right direction, and good news, and a big thank you to all of our residents and businesses who continue to adopt and play by these new rules that we're all living under. It is working, and that infection rate is coming down, and the sooner it comes down, the sooner we can get back to normal. So a big thank you to everybody for everything that they are doing, and to our brilliant NHS and key workers who continue to work on behalf of all of us in the borough. This is a remote meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. We are streaming live onto the Council's YouTube channel. We're not in control of the live comment section, so if you are using the comment section, please do so considerately. Agenda item 1 tonight is apologies for absence. We are a full house of members this evening. We do have a couple of members from the Wickford Independents, and we also have a member from the Absolute Independents. Abfab himself is here. So we have Kevin here as well. They are not voting members, but they will be invited to speak later on if they so wish. Agenda item 2, members, is declarations of interest. Is there any member with a declaration? You can wave at me. No member is indicating. Oh, sorry, Councillor Smith, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The part 2 item about the ambulance site, that needs the covenant lifted by Essex County Council. And I'm a member of Essex County Council. Okay. Same for you, Councillor Headley?
Correct.
Thank you. That is noted. There are no other declarations of interest from any member, in which case we go on to the minutes of our previous meeting that was held on the 3rd of December. Firstly, are there any matters arising from the minutes? I will just point out that in the minutes, it does say that tonight we were due to receive a report on the census. We'll cover this in the work programme, but that will be coming to our March meeting, not to this one. So that's a slight, not wrong, the minutes. It was just my fault for not getting it on the agenda in time. So that will come to our March meeting. Are there any other matters arising from the minutes from members? No, in which case can I ask the members of the committee to unmute themselves, and we will take a vote on signing them as a true record. Councillor Smith?
In favour.
Councillor Brown?
In favour.
Councillor McGorran?
In favour.
Councillor Baggott?
For.
Councillor Headley?
Agreed.
Councillor Sullivan?
For.
I vote in favour as well. So the minutes are carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Agenda item 4, which is on page 17 to 19 of the agenda, is our work programme. As I said just a moment or two ago, we will bring that census report to the March meeting of this committee. Does any member wish to speak on this item? No member is indicating, in which case if I can ask the members of the committee to unmute themselves again. We are asked to consider and endorse the work programme. So Councillor Smith, how do you vote?
In favour.
Councillor Brown?
In favour.
Councillor McGorran?
In favour.
Councillor Baggott?
Against.
Councillor Headley?
Against.
Councillor Sullivan?
Against.
I vote in favour. Scrutiny in action, my friends. So the work programme is carried. Agenda item 5 is a report looking at a company group structure. Members, you will be advised that earlier on today, an addendum was sent round with a revision on the recommendations, just to make it absolutely clear that what the committee is doing tonight is recommending to full council for a decision this evening. But I'm going to ask Mr. Sparks to introduce the report, and then we will open this up for questions. Owen?
Thank you, Chair. So at the moment, the council has 2 wholly owned subsidiary companies, Sempra Homes Limited and Acorn House Developments Limited. Both these companies are operated on a commercial basis and are therefore subject to the payment of taxes as required by legislation. This report sets out a company structure that will minimise this tax liability by forming the council and the companies into a formal group structure. As it stands, the company structure is not efficient from a tax perspective, as each has to deal with its tax affairs as a separate entity. If the companies were grouped differently, however, they could take advantage of permitted offsetting arrangements, which reduce the tax paid overall by the group. Offsetting arrangements effectively permit profits made in one subsidiary to be offset against losses made in another, such that the tax payable is calculated for combined profits or losses across the group. This is permitted for trading profits and chargeable gains, which is increases in capital asset values. To allow for this, it's necessary to insert a holding company between the council and subsidiary companies to create a corporation tax group. This is because for corporation tax purposes, a company is defined as any body corporate or an unincorporated association, but does not include a local authority. Therefore, the council could not form part of any group for the purposes of offsetting this tax. The proposed group structure is set out in enclosure 2. The council currently exercises controls over the operations of subsidiary companies in its role as shareholder. This control is general in nature, usually in the form of approving a business plan to establish objectives and financial limits, rather than control over day-to-day functions, which is the responsibility of the directors appointed to the company. This will still remain a requirement for the council to approve business plans or other controls established for any subsidiary companies owned by the holding company, as this will be the basis for the council financing the holding company, such as in turn finance subsidiaries. To this extent, there is no loss of control on the operations of subsidiaries as a result of the measures being suggested to be put in place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sparks. Members, we're going to open this one up for. Are you putting your hand up there, Councillor Sullivan? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Sullivan, your hand is getting lost in your background.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I've literally come straight from work, which is the computer to the side of me here, so I haven't actually seen the amendment that you just mentioned. One of the questions I was going to ask was on recommendation 6, because it wasn't clear if it was coming back to the committee or the full council. Would someone just mind telling me what the recommendation reads now, because that might forestall one of the questions, and then after that I've got a couple of other questions, if I may, please.
Yeah, so recommendation 6 is that it will come back to a meeting of the full council. So it will be going to full council from here.
So it will read, it recommends to a meeting of the full council the terms of reference of this committee are amended so that the function of shareholder is owned by the council. Is that what you're saying? You come back. Sorry, I haven't got it in front of me. I've literally just.
No worries. I'm trying to get 3 different things on my screen. So it will read that the terms of reference of the P&R committee are amended to confirm that it exercises the function of a shareholder of companies owned by the council. And then in the next part, it says the Section 151 officer, in consultation with the head of legal and democracy, prepares articles of association, shareholder agreement with associated reserved matters for the holding company, and a shareholder agreement with associated reserved matters for each of its subsidiary companies for consideration and approval by full council.
Okay, so items, recommendation 6 then was that the council is operates the function of the shareholder of companies. That's still the case, is it?
It is.
Yeah.
For ease, do you want? Have you got it in front of you in terms of your screen, Councillor Sullivan?
No, and I might.
Okay.
I think if Paul Berkinshaw's got his hand up, he might be able to.
Yeah, I'll come to Paul. I'm just wondering, Karina, whether we just share it on screen just so that councillors can see the addendum.
Yeah.
Paul, do you want to go in?
Yeah, we're just going to confirm. I mean, we can share the wording of the recommendation, but I think just to confirm what that recommendation is saying is that the council obviously needs to exercise a number of functions as the shareholder, and that recommendation is saying to council that it agrees that the Policy and Resources Committee exercises them functions going forward. So, for example, if in the reserve matters it's to appoint directors to the companies, then this committee would do that rather than all such matters being held by full council. So it's just seeking to be clear that this committee will deal with shareholder functions, but the full council needs to agree obviously to that, and therefore it'll be put to the next full council meeting for them to consider and possibly approve that. Hopefully that clarifies the purpose of that recommendation and what it seeks to achieve, but the wording is shown on there as Karina has just posted.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, do you
have... Okay, then, yes. If I could Just a couple of other questions then, probably for Owen.
Are you
Just-
satisfied, sorry, at the moment that we can take this off the screen?
Yeah, yes, sorry.
Okay, let's do that. Go on.
Right.
So,
Just with regard to, again, the recommendations say that we're appointing 2 people as companies, as directors, and it mentions Chief Financial Officer. I just wanted to, could you just clarify, the Chief Financial Officer is always a Section 151 officer? They could never be 2 separate people, could they? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's me, yeah.
And my second question is, again, you're appointing, you're naming the 2 officers that are going to be the directors. It doesn't mention who's going to be the company secretary, which you must have also for a limited company. Is there any particular reason for that, or can you tell me who that would be? It's just that is an officer of the limited company, in the same way as you have to have a director, you also got to have a secretary. So I would have thought that you should, in the recommendation, say we would nominate so and so as the company secretary.
oh, Mr. Larkman.
Yeah, thanks. My understanding is there's no requirement to have somebody appointed specifically as a company secretary any longer.
Okay.
So I think that used to be the case. I think it's been updated, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It used to be the case a few years ago, and it's been updated now.
Okay.
Thank you. The reason I asked, I'll just clarify, one of my very earliest jobs, it was in a company that used to form limited companies, and you always had to have a company secretary, but obviously my knowledge is about 30 years out of date, so thank you for that.
No worries. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any other member with a question? Councillor Baggett.
Yeah, I mean, I get the taxation reasons behind this, and I'm going to support the recommendation. Where I have reservations, and this is just where I have said this before, we have a time where we've had officers working around the clock, resources are stretched, and now we're adding another company where officers are responsible for goings on within it. And I do think that when we are setting up arm's length organisations, consideration should be given to what expertise there might be outside the council that allows there to be some input, both with regard to what they do, and also to take some of that resource and resource strain away from officers. So while I'm not going to vote against the proposal, I do have reservations that maybe it could have been a little bit better.
Thank you, Councillor Baggett. I think the purpose and the idea, as well as obviously trying to ensure the taxpayer is protected in terms of tax efficiency, is also to try and help simplify the workload of some of our senior officers as well. Is there anyone else with their hand up? Owen, your hand is up. Do you? Oh no, sorry. Is that you, Paul? Is that a legacy hand?
I didn't realise I had my hand up, Chairman. So if it is, then yes, it's a legacy.
Okay, fine.
Is it me? I think it might be me, Chair.
Do you want to come in, Owen? No, you're not much.
Yeah, I was only going to say that we take advice and support from external advisors and manage some of the companies and the financial aspects, etc. So just to reassure Councillor Baggett that we look at that as part of our company management.
Okay, thank you. Members, our recommendations are on the addendum that has been sent round to you and which was displayed on screen. We're going to move to the vote. If I can ask members of the committee to unmute themselves. Councillor Smith, how do you vote?
In favour.
Councillor Brown.
In favour.
Councillor McGurran.
Favour.
Councillor Baggett.
For.
Councillor Headley.
Agreed.
Councillor Sullivan.
For.
I assume you said agreed then, Councillor Headley.
Correct.
Very good. I vote in favour as well. So that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Richard and Paul, for that. Agenda item 6 is the digital inclusion policy. This is listed on pages 31 to 48 of your agendas this evening. And I want to particularly thank the COVID working group for the work that they have been doing since they were formed back in the summer, looking at digital inclusion. Clearly, this is a very topical policy, given what we know is happening with schools and remote learning. And in fact, one of our committee members is is having to teach remotely at this moment in time as well. So knows all too well about that. And obviously some people have got children doing it as well. But it's not just about that. It's also the social isolation piece that we know about and various other bits and pieces. So it is a very timely report. And I'm going to ask Mr. Ray to introduce it, and then we will move into a debate. So Joe, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone. Good to be here. I won't spend too long, obviously, talking through the report because you've got it, but there are a few key points that I wanted to raise and sort of draw members' attention to, really. As the Chair's already said, this is work that's gone through the COVID-19 response working group. That's relevant because digital inclusion has been a long-standing ambition of the Council's digital strategy, but it's one of many areas where the need has been accelerated and emphasised by what's happened throughout the COVID pandemic. And earlier on during the pandemic, especially during the first lockdown, this was really borne out through the work of the community hub, where after the initial demand focused on things like the delivery of food and medication, we started to see demand transfer into people being lonely and being isolated, as the Chair said there. And one of the challenges we found around that was in a completely lockdown situation, and members will remember that first lockdown that we had between March and, roughly speaking, July was incredibly tough and was very strictly adhered to as well. During that period, we found that people's loneliness and isolation was made worse when there wasn't any access or the ability to use digital technology and to access web-based services. And it's obvious when you think about it, in a pandemic like this one, where face-to-face contact is so rightly and so often impossible and skewed, being able to have access to a range of different options and opportunities for social interaction online is really significant. So that was one of the first things that we found when working through the COVID working group, and I've alluded in the cover report to some work that was commissioned off the back of that through the community hub. But actually there are a broader set of circumstances that are really affected by people's ability to connect to online services, whether that's ability in terms of their knowledge and understanding, or whether it's their ability in terms of their financial situation and their ability to access either devices or indeed the internet itself. And it cross-cuts a range of different things, and I think everyone on this meeting would probably understand that, because obviously we're all people who participate often in that digital service economy, either through our roles here in this kind of example that the meeting itself gives, or in our personal lives. But there's a significant body of research that shows that there's an impact on people's ability to participate in a range of different life outcomes. And in the report, we talk about 5 key areas where people will be disadvantaged if they're not able to be part of the digital world. And that's related to earnings. So it massively affects people's earnings potential, whether or not they're able to participate fully in the digital economy and other areas of digital life. Employment itself, so as well as your potential of earning once you're in a role or the types of roles you can go for, what we're finding now is that more and more roles require some base level of digital skills, and that's only going to increase. And it does tend to be one of these examples of where those people who are already in perhaps some of the least advantaged and sort of most deprived situations, so people in low skilled precarious employment, who are probably at most risk of seeing their roles being automated, are also the ones least likely to have the skills required to allow them to go off and find new employment in a different sector or a different part of the same sector. Retail is a really, really important point. I'm sure everyone in this meeting has used, to a greater or lesser extent, online shopping facilities. And obviously there's a convenience and choice factor within that, but also we find that there are significant discounts that are only available to people who are able to access online services. We've already sort of talked a bit about well-being in terms of things like loneliness and the ability to communicate, but even in normal times, that does have a really important role to play, especially in terms of keeping in touch with people who might be geographically distant from someone else. And also there's a big time saving. People tend to be able to save time in their lives by being able to access services digitally. So with that as the sort of key 5 benefits, for us as a council, what we're proposing for our policy is to focus on 5 key areas, which will really help address some of the issues that we've been talking about. So one of the primary ones is ensuring people have connectivity. And I think I've spoken at this committee before, but I've spoken in other places certainly about the fact that in Basildon we have a few different challenges. So we have people who don't have any access to any kind of internet service at all, and there are reasons for that. But also we have people who have access to internet services as far as they can be fulfilled by using a 3G or 4G smartphone. So there's lots that you can do with that combination of device and internet access, but there's lots that you can't do. And then also we have quite a significant situation in terms of the potential connection of Basildon Borough is very high. We have very high rates of availability for superfast broadband, but actually we have quite low percentage of potential connections taken to that level. So around about 70% of households are connected at superfast levels or above. And actually that leaves a big gap between the total who could have potentially been connected to superfast and who aren't. And obviously superfast broadband, I won't get into the technical details of that, but it's becoming more and more important in terms of people's abilities to participate digitally across a range of different areas. The other thing, some of the other areas I just want to really touch on before I hand over to the committee for debate is around areas such as accessibility. So actually ensuring that people have the opportunity to have devices that will allow them to access the internet. Digital skills, and obviously a lot of what we're talking about touches on that one in a way that can be a bit overarching, but that encompasses a range of things from people who aren't digitally literate at all and who have no understanding of even how to turn a computer on, through to then helping those people access a range of services in a way that makes sense for them and that they can remember and they can replicate and use effectively and safely. Also within all of that is another key area for us is confidence. A lot of people perhaps do have the skills or could learn the skills, but don't have the confidence in their ability to do it. And then finally, I've always found this quite an interesting one, but motivation is quite a big aspect as well. There are lots of people who don't actually see the benefit for themselves in terms of how of why they'd even want to become digitally savvy or digitally connected. So they're the key areas that we're looking to focus at. This is a policy, so it doesn't contain loads of detail about the types of things that we might do to address these issues. That will come forward once we develop a strategy and an accompanying action plan. However, what I would say is that through the work of the Community Hub and the work of the COVID Working Group, we have started a pilot using funding from external partners that is a kind of example of the type of thing that we might look to do. So one of the pieces of work that we undertook during the summer as part of the Community Hub and also came through the COVID Working Group was the survey of over 1,000 activity centre and sheltered housing tenants, so activity centre users and sheltered housing tenants, to get an understanding of what was stopping them from being digitally included. And on the basis of that, one of the things we're looking to do now is to instigate a pilot, which, like I say, we've already secured funding for from external sources, that will allow us to secure some devices, have some digital buddies, we're calling them, people who are trained and are able to teach people to be able to effectively use digital ways of working and digital ways of living their life, and then reaching hopefully up to 100 people from those sorts of groups to be able to give them an understanding of how they can use digital effectively. The other thing I should say as well is, and this will be the final thing I say before I stop talking and hand back to you all. You will have noticed, I think, in the cover report that I have undertaken service impact assessment for this, and I've been clear in that once we start delivering the strategy, pending the approval of this policy tonight, we're going to have to continue to develop that SIA alongside the strategy itself, and that's because, by its very nature, as you would expect, this kind of work touches on and is in fact quite often directly aimed at different groups of our residents and different parts of our population that have protected characteristics. So we need to do everything we can do to ensure that, without making a really hackneyed pun, that this work is as inclusive as possible. So just another consideration for us as we're working through this, we need to be even more aware than we would always be of how much this will affect and impact people from protected characteristics, and ensuring that we do everything we can to help those people participate. And that is me. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to bring in the chair of the COVID recovery working group, Councillor McGarren.
Thank you. To start off with, I'm sorry, Chair, I have to correct you. The work of the COVID working group on this actually started in late spring, not summer, but it has been vitally important. I'm very proud of this policy document. I'd like to thank Councillor Brockman, who's also a member of the working group, for her at times rather forthright opinions, but very welcome, and also, to be absolutely fair, her enthusiasm and passion for it as well, which is true of all members of the working group, who I think all had very different takes on the situation, but all had valid contributions to make. But most importantly of all, I'd like to thank not just Joe, but all the officers involved, because I think we identified very early on, you know, that obviously COVID was going to change our landscape in all sorts of ways, but digital inclusion was at the heart of that. It posed a series of challenges that the Community Hub were at the front line of very quickly, and it will continue to do so. And I think, you know, as Joe rightly said, this is a policy and not a strategy, but there's also already a lot of really good work, and Joe alluded to it, on the strategy development as well. If we get the strategy right, and we will, this will transform lives for the better throughout the borough of Basildon. What it did was shine a light on what was a huge issue anyway, but it became even bigger, even more important, even more essential that we tackle it as quickly as possible. And it's interesting, one of the things, you know, and all of us, you know, order certain, if not all of our shopping, some of our shopping online, some of our clothes online, etc., etc. But as the report indicates, I think it's 13%. Might have the figure wrong. It's in there. Check if I'm wrong. Are excluded from that? No, sorry, it's not 13%. Those that are excluded are 13% worse off as a result of being excluded. Thanks for nodding, Joe. And that's quite a shocking figure, because that's on top of everything else that the disadvantaged have to face. This is yet another poverty premium. And what we're saying in Basildon is, we will do everything within our power to remove that poverty premium, to put people on a level playing field. It is not right that people who can least afford it are paying significantly more for their products. And in terms, you know, Joe's done a whistle-stop tour of the report. I would refer you to page 32 and 42, where it outlines what we aim to, you know, the key things that need to be addressed and the results of them, because I genuinely believe this can change lives for the better in Basildon, and I really hope we will get across the board support for it. So I'm not going to bang on and try and antagonise anyone.
That would be unlike you, Councillor McGarren. Councillor Headley, you next.
Thank you, Chairman. Referring to page 44, the paragraph immediately after the 3 numbered bullet points, the Superfast Essex programme, I think there should have been an acknowledgement that the figures contained in that paragraph refer to the success of this programme, which has been delivered by Essex County Council. This isn't a Basildon Council delivery. And I'm not sure, reading this report, what we're adding.
It's a seller, and it does. It's a seller, and it does say that.
If I could finish without interruption, please. This super fast broadband was done through Essex County Council, and the question is, what are Basildon doing to enhance? I can't see anything in here positive that Basildon are doing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Headley. I mean, with respect, and I understand why, given that you are up for election to the county council, and there is understandable nervousness at County Hall right now about the future.
The list of candidates hasn't been given.
Oh, well, we wait with bated breath as to who it is that will stand in the Billericay West division. But you will see at the top of page 45.
There isn't a Billericay West division.
Okay, fine.
Billericay division.
Whichever one, knock yourselves out on semantics. But at the top of page 45, you will see where it references the work of a seller. And a seller has been working to get full fibre broadband rolled out across the South Essex region. The DCMS grant monies that came into the region to enable that to happen were not given to Essex County Council. They were given to a seller, and a seller has been part of the rollout of that. They continue to look, as it says here, at the additional sites across the 6 authority areas where that needs to happen. In fact, I think Billericay is one of the first parts of the Acela rollout where that will be taking place, perhaps controversially, but nonetheless, it is on the list for that. So we play a leading role in Acela, and without our contribution to it, that money would not have come into the region from the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. So I hope you will accept that there has been a contribution, a very large one, from Basildon via Acela, and it will be to the benefit of our residents and businesses. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Headley, or observations?
At this point.
Very good. Councillor Baggott.
Thank you, Chairman. It's very, very rare that I agree with things that you say. But
that's easier.
I agree. And in fact, I sat on Acela when the bid went into the government for the funding for superfast broadband, and we were overjoyed at the time that it was received and the impact that it could have. But taking Councillor Headley's point, this is the key thing about the constant we did this, we did this. If it wasn't for Basildon Council, Acela and Essex County Council, you would have a patchwork which isn't joined up. And it's a testament to the joined upness of the whole thing that allows our residents ultimately to be able to benefit. Now, one of the things that did come out of Acela, and this is not wanting to pick the digital inclusion policy, because I appreciate this is slightly tangential to, but the aim at the time had been that there was a project whereby the areas where connectivity was low, it would be possible that if there was a council building or council facility to ping effectively the broadband into homes within a radius of each of those facility, even if it was as simple as a phone line, for instance. What would be useful is to know, not necessarily tonight, but at some point, what progress has been made, because I know that I sat with the chief executive in his office with the map showing the areas whereby this could be achieved, the areas where it couldn't. And it does give us the opportunity to ensure that there is this connectivity right the way across the borough for the benefit of residents. What I would like to do is also, before I go into the policy itself, is thank Essex County Council for the rollout of laptops that they have been doing very successfully, not just in Basildon, but Basildon are one of the prime recipients of it, but across Essex in general, because Councillor McGovern is absolutely right. It's the people that are at the worst end of the financial spectrum that don't necessarily have the luxury to be able to afford a laptop or a tablet, either for themselves or for their children. And the ability, and I know that Basildon Council has contributed a significant number of laptops as well. And again, the ability to do that and to get these laptops into the homes of disadvantaged people can only be a benefit to the residents overall. And I absolutely commend that. When it comes to policy, and please, this isn't meant to be critical. When you look at the policy, it's not a magnum opus 5-year head scratching exercise that's been done here. A lot of it's been taken from other studies, and a lot of it is pretty much common sense. But it is needed because, of course, what springs from the policy is the strategy. And as Councillor Harrison knows from numerous conversations we've had at various committees, and there has been confusion in the past at officer level and at member level about the difference between a policy and a strategy. But what definitely is the case is that if the strategy isn't right, the policy fails by definition. So when Mr. Ray was talking about the strategy and Councillor McGurran, absolutely right. That's now got to be the real piece of work, because it's the strategy that will ultimately determine the outcomes that are required by the policy. And I look forward to seeing how that rolls out, what it is, and the ideas that come forward from that. I will be supporting this because there's no reason why not to. And I do commend the work that's been done at council level by officers and members, but also in the wider view of both Acela and Essex County Council. And I'm not up for it. I can pretty much tell you that I'm not up for election at Essex County Council, so therefore I have no particular axe to grind either way when I make that commendation.
That inevitably leads me to ask if you weren't selected or if it was of your own volition, but I won't.
Well, I'll answer as you've asked. It was of my own volition. I'm a great believer that when you've got incredibly capable people already in a role, why would you want to actually try and supplant that?
I agree, which is why I hope.
And that's why when you do supplant it, that's because you don't feel that they have, and that's why we stand against you at elections.
And hence why I hope Councillor McGowan is replacing Councillor Hillier in the days and the weeks ahead.
Chicken run, is that?
No, he's gone to Dorset. No, that's the chicken run.
Oh.
But
I think the chair is referring to county elections, not.
Yeah, very much so. In the context of the selection conversation there about county elections. I mean, I'll come back on some of the other points in a moment. There's other members who want to come in, but I'd just say 2 points. One is that on the map that you described around where in the borough the broadband and the Acela monies can be put into, I think that's potentially something for the commercialisation subcommittee to look at as part of when we're rolling out our digitalisation programme. So we meet next Tuesday on that, so that subcommittee can debate whether or not we add that to our work programme on that. And the only other point I would say is, I know they don't turn up anymore, but Essex County Council are part of Acela. They are signatories to that MOU. So when we talk about Acela here, we are also including Essex County Council. And I would hope that, sooner rather than later, they decide via Councillor Finch to re-engage and to come back and to sit around the table with the 6 authorities that are pursuing, as you can see from this report, some very good work as well. But they are signatories to that MOU, so they should be included when we talk about Acela. I have Councillor Sullivan next, and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. The last meeting of PNR, I had cause to criticise the quality of the writing and the content of the policies that we were considering in that meeting. But in this one, I have to say this is a much better written policy than the ones we were looking at last time. I think it's got clear aims, means to achieve it, and clear outcomes. If I was to have a very slight quibble with the content of it, in the context section, it gives specific time-limited research and facts, like from 2018 and 2020, and all that will mean is that the policy becomes updated quicker, and you will have to keep renewing it quicker or do more research. That's only sort of a minor quibble on that. And then really the only further point I wanted to make was I note on page 44 of the agenda that the ambition is to deliver full fibre links to Wat Tyler Country Park, which, had that been done more promptly, I think then the innovation warehouse would still be viable and we wouldn't have lost £800,000 of inward investment. Thanks.
Only we owned a train line. Councillor Smith.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. My tin of drink had some condensation on, so my hand was a bit slippery. I first better to declare that I'm a member of Essex County Council. We obviously, Councillor Headley raised the point of Essex County Council's involvement with the Superfast Broadband Rollout project. And it would be remiss of me, because I'm dealing with an item of casework along Dry Street, where there's 60 or so properties that are not in, they can't get the Superfast open reach broadband rollout. And they're so close to the town, so close to the hospital, that the residents there can, if they pay a lot of money to get the Superfast broadband. Now, Dry Street, okay, 60 odd properties, but there surely must be places in the back and beyond of Bowers Gifford, around Billericay, the 127 corridor in Wickford. And I just wonder, if Dry Street slipped through the net, are there any other places that slip through the net of this Superfast broadband rollout? Is it something that could be picked up by Mr. A through the chair? Because it's worth checking out, because whether you live in a house, flat, tower block, or a little countryside place, broadband is become now a vital utility like gas, water, and electricity.
I think you're right, and I think I'm sensing an appetite from members to perhaps actually come back to this committee, perhaps a bit later on in the year, with a bit of an update on where we are with that rollout of the full fibre broadband via a seller and the work that's going on there. So I don't see any reason, Karina, why we can't add that onto the work programme for later on in the year. Mr. Birkinshaw?
Just confirm, yeah, Chairman, obviously that's ongoing, been led primarily by Lee Hesse, and we'll be happy to bring an update to members as it suits within your work programme. I'm more than happy to do so, as that understanding and any questions.
Very good. Okay, so let's do that. I mean, look, from my perspective, I think, I agree with lots of the points from all members that have been raised here this evening. I think, first thing Monday morning, we get the report out from the Centre for Cities, and you'll hear me talk about it a lot over the next few weeks and months, because it really does underline the problems and the challenges and the opportunities that exist in our borough. It shows as starkly as possible, in comparison with the likes of Manchester, Edinburgh, London, we are in, the top 5 when it comes to things like business startups, GDP, the top 10 for business startups. And yet when it comes to things like MVQ 4+ qualifications, we are 60th out of 63. When it comes to things around affordable housing, we're not anywhere near being where we should be. So it shows that disconnect between growth and inclusive growth really exists in our borough. And I look at what we can do with digital, and I agree entirely with the point that Councillor Smith has just made. When you buy a house, when you move into a house, you expect there to be water, you expect there to be a central heating system in many cases. So I see broadband as being an essential utility. And I personally think we should be looking at obligations in the future on developers through the planning committee on making sure that when people walk in on day one, that there is a broadband supply in these properties. I think that is something not just here in Basildon, that should be happening now as a matter of course for everyone and anyone. And I think that is so essential, particularly as well when you look at for us, we know with universal credit, and we've looked in this committee before at what goes on in Revs and Bens, digital by default. Everything is online in terms of how a member of the public is to apply for universal credit, to monitor universal credit. We as a council by 2025 have an ambition to fully digitalise all of our services, and we're taking next Tuesday through the subcommittee reports that are looking at how we can do that. The pandemic has shown more people looking to get involved, whether it be through DocuSign and all the other things that we've done online to help people sign tenancy agreements and move houses and all that sort of stuff as well. And hopefully, please God, this doesn't happen, but the figures around potentially up to 10% unemployment in the country by the end of the calendar year and things like that, access to the job market will be via online. It won't be done in the age-old way of printing out your CV and walking into a shop and handing it over. It will be done online, and we're going to need to be able to support people who are looking for work in the job market as well. We also know the government announced this week that there is the potential for education catch-up throughout the summer months. So we want to ensure that, again, we don't just forget about this when COVID goes and the schools reopen on or after the 8th of March. There has to be a continuous investment in this. I'm not going to be critical of others, but the Department for Education have had a nightmare on this from start to finish. And I know from talking to head teachers in my own ward that there have been real problems with getting laptops and computers to the people who need them in the volume that need them as well. So I hope that can be resolved. I think the key thing for me, I would say this, would I not, is that when you look at the report that is before us, you start to see that page 33 talks about legislation and policy, and you're seeing now that we are bringing forward a solid framework of policies that we can then build on and deliver for the council in terms of meeting those corporate plan objectives. And when we talk about outcomes, again, I would look at this. How about a computer suite with state-of-the-art technology and computers that are available from 4 p.m. till 9 p.m. and all day on Saturdays and Sundays, every single night for every 18 to 19-year-old? Sounds like a good idea, that, to me. So
yeah, but it's called the library. It used to be called the library, and sadly it's not anymore. It used to be called the library.
And now it can be called the youth zone. So why don't we get behind a fantastic policy for the borough, which will have computer suites available for all young people to be able to go in and use 7 days a week throughout the course of the year. That's an outcome of this strategy. That's starting to, of this policy. That's starting to address through the interventions the council can make some of those key things for our young people as well. Our recommendation this evening is on page 31. If I can ask members of the committee to unmute themselves, we will move to the vote. Councillor Smith.
In favour.
Councillor Brown.
Massively in favour.
Councillor McGarren.
Even more in favour than Adele, if that's possible.
Councillor Baggott.
Even more in favour than Councillor McGurran.
Here's the excitement building. Councillor Headley. There we go. Councillor Sullivan.
Just for.
There we go. I vote in favour as well. So the policy is carried unanimously. Thank you, Joe. Thank you to the policy team, and thank you to members for your contributions there. Agenda item 7 is set out on pages 49 to 114. Checking everyone's still here because everyone just keeps moving on my screen. And then I hear noises as if someone's dropped off, but everyone is still here, aren't they? Yeah. Okay. So page 49 onwards for the draft budget. I suspect I know how this is going to go. Who blinks first? Who sits on their hands? But here we go. Mr. Sparks, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the Council's overall financial position for 2021-22 and forward forecast 24-25. Enclosure number 2 from page 59 details the relevant information in support of setting the Council's budget for the general fund services and council tax for 21-22, together with the financial forecast information. Also included is information on the housing revenue account budget for 21-22, the financial forecast, and also an updated HRA 30-year financial strategy. The figures presented summarise the detailed service budgets considered by the service committees in November and December, together with subsequent adjustments, including the impact of local government financial settlement, which is still provisional at this stage. Policy and Resources Committee is asked to consider the proposals and make recommendations to full council for approval on the 25th of February. The report sets out financial implications of the pandemic as they are currently known, including confirmed government funding support for next year. It's proposed the committee recommends to council that council tax for 21-22 should be frozen at 2021 levels. The Band D charge be set at £278.91 per annum. As the government has assumed in its forecast of local authority spending power, the council tax will rise by 1.99%. A number of specific strands of work are planned to ensure that the Council's resources, the service it delivers, and the wider strategic planning framework are all directed towards achievement of the Council's corporate plan. In this regard, the Chairman of the Policy and Resources Committee has recommended that the budget includes provision for new investments in the borough for 21-22, and these set out in the MTFS, including enclosure 2 on page 62. The Council's budget forecast shows that although the 21-22 position is balanced, there's a gap between expenditure and resources of £1.9 million by 24-25. This highlights the requirement to continue to deliver budget reductions and increased income in order to deliver a sustainable medium-term financial position, reducing forecast budget gaps over the medium term. The general fund and HRA capital programmes are included in the capital and investment strategy, and this is included in the next item on this agenda. The revenue implications of these programmes are fully reflected in the percentage revenue budgets. The capital investment strategy was considered last night at the Audit and Risk Committee. The housing revenue account budget is balanced in all future years. Provision is made for continued investment in existing stock and a new build acquisition programme. It's proposed that rents increase by 1.5%, which is CPI plus 1%. Attached to enclosure 5 is the policy pay statement. The Local Act 2011 and supplementary guidance requires local authorities to produce a pay policy statement for each financial year. This must be approved formally at full council. The committee is asked to consider the policy and endorse it for ultimate approval. As part of this, the Chief Executive has reviewed the arrangements for full-inflated pay to staff and grades CM1 and above. At this time, these proposals are still subject to consultation, but expect this will be concluded to allow the pay policy to be updated in time for full council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sparks. Members, we will begin a debate. Councillor Baggott.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's a shame, really. It's a shame that this report has come to this committee in order to recommend it to council, but unfortunately is preempted by a press release that goes out from the council stating it is a done deal, claiming that this is what's going to happen without any form of debate, without any form of democracy whatsoever. And it just put a bit of a mockery on the debate we're going to have now, when days ago the council had informed the public and misinformed the public that it was a done deal. So I just don't see the point to going through a sham of now commenting on something which the council have already laid out as a fait accompli to members.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baggott. Any other member? Councillor Harrison.
Right, okay. Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm unmuted. Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say that it's been a pleasure as part of the Alliance for all the groups in the Alliance to work together to produce this budget. And I think that should be recognised. We've all had our say, and I think it's something which the public, if they understand it, will fully support what we're doing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. There is no other member indicating to speak on this. I will say more, obviously, on the 25th of February, but thank you to officers, particularly Mr. Sparks and Mr. Larkman, for all of your hard work. There has never been a bigger budget gap in the history of Basildon Council than the budget gap that we have had to confront with the 7 million gap this year. So a huge effort from all of the finance team for what you've done. Councillor Smith, were you trying to come in then? No?
No.
Okay, all right. In which case, the recommendation for us on this, or the recommendations, are set out on page 50 of the report. If I can ask members to unmute themselves, then we will move to the. Yeah, okay, we'll move to the vote. Yes, fine. All right, Councillor Smith.
In favour.
Councillor Brown.
In favour.
Councillor McGarren.
Favour.
Councillor Baggott.
As we will be moving an alternative budget on the 25th of February, the only party to ever have moved and continue to move an alternative budget. Against.
I moved one in 2019. Councillor Headley.
Against.
Councillor Sullivan.
Against.
And I vote in favour. So the motion is carried, and we will send the budget as is up to full council on the 25th. Thank you, members. Pages 115 to 174 detail the capital and investment strategy for 2021-2022. This has come to us from the Chairman of Audit and Risk, Mr. Larkman. Is this you?
Yes, thank you. Hello, members. Just a very brief introduction. The capital and investment strategy meets three key requirements that are imposed upon the council. It meets the requirements of the Prudential Code in that it includes a capital strategy and prudential indicators, etc. It meets the requirements of the Treasury Management Code because it includes a Treasury Management strategy, and it meets the requirements of the statutory investment guidance issued by MHCLG in that it includes a strategy in terms of cash investment. Combining these three gives members a complete picture of the proposed capital investing and treasury activity for the council, not just for next year, but looking ahead to future years as well. As Owen mentioned in his introduction to the previous report, all of the revenue consequences of these proposals have been included in the draft budget that you have just considered. This was considered by the Audit and Risk Committee last night. They had one observation, which I promised faithfully that I would share with you. It's a minor change in wording. If you go to page 135 and you go to the section which is headed commercial lending, and you go to the second paragraph says these investments will generally be asset-backed schemes. The word generally will be removed. These schemes will always be asset-backed. Assuming that the committee agrees tonight, then this report will be considered alongside the budget by council on the 25th of February. The strategy is enclosed as enclosure number 2, and that starts on page 125. And rather than try and anticipate your lines of inquiry on this report, I'll stop there and take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larkman. It is pleasing to see Audit and Risk doing their job so diligently on page 135. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Baggott mentioned, the last agenda item will be presenting an alternative budget, so obviously we vote against this. However, I would like to take the opportunity just to see if I could have some clarification on some of the capital programme investment items that are on page 131. I don't know if Owen or Richard are at liberty to give me some more detail, but if I could just read out the items that I'm asking, if you could give me some more detail around what they represent. So as I said, page 131, capital programme, you've got neighbourhoods and public spaces investment, 500,000 for 21, 22, 22, 23. And then further down, policy and resources investment, nothing this year, but the following year, 1 million, and then the year after that, 2 million. Underneath that, housing and communities investment, 2.1 million, and then 500,000 every year after. And then finally, underneath financing, government grants, 5.9 million for 2 years. Just if I have some more clarification on what those are, please. Thank you.
So on MPS, P&R, housing and communities, the answer is no. You can't have more information. And then on the financing and the government grants, Owen, Mr. Larkman, do you want to answer that one?
It is the funding for disabled facility grants, which is £1 million in each year. And then the 4.9 million in the first 2 years is the funding in respect of the housing infrastructure grant that we're in receipt of for the Great Oaks quarter.
So the HIF money, yeah, which the Town Centre Revival Committee's looked at. Any further questions, Councillor Sullivan? Very good. Any other member wishing to speak on this? No, very good. In which case, could we please unmute? The recommendation is on page 116. Councillor Smith?
In favour.
Councillor Brown?
In favour.
Councillor McGowan?
In favour.
Councillor Baggott?
Against.
Councillor Headley?
Against.
Councillor Sullivan?
Against.
And I am in favour. So the recommendation is carried and it will be sent to full council for debate on the 25th of February. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, members. Agenda item 9 is the exclusion of the press and the public in order to debate. Hey, look at the hands fly up. In order to debate commercially sensitive information on behalf of the taxpayer. Councillor Baggott, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose that these the items 10, 11 and 12, the exclusion of public and press, are voted on separately. The reason for that, given that the item 11, the Deputy Leader has already given to the press verbatim the things contained within that.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
I don't see the point to it going into
Where's
part
the
2. And
Where's
the
the
evidence is the quotes from Councillor Smith stating how happy he is with the report and everything else. Secondly, given that you as an individual yourself on many occasions said that it's incumbent upon us to be transparent and only going to part 2 where absolutely necessary, that there can be no reason for going into part 2 for that item, as it's already been plastered all over the Echo.
Thank you, Councillor Baggott. I will hear the point of order from Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're very good. I refer to the point of order the opposition keep bringing up, is it this 16 deal, whatever it's called, where it's impugning the reputation of a member.
14.
If Councillor Baggott has got any evidence that I have leaked anything, then he needs to give it to the monitoring officer rather than throw a slurred allegation at someone. If the press asks me about something that I have been campaigning against, the Pound Shop Hotel, and something positive going in my ward, I have every right as an elected member to make that representation so my constituents know my views, so when they vote, they have an informed choice. But throwing slurs without any shred of evidence is beneath an elected member.
Members, I think it is regrettable that part 2 information has been leaked in the way that it has. It is not good practice. It is not. It's not in order to do it. Equally, it is not in order to use a public forum to accuse any member of anything without evidence. That is something that members of the opposition have done to me in the not so distant past without a shred of evidence. And I'm not going to allow it again this evening. I read the article that was in the Echo. I think you would be pretty daft to leak an item and then put your name all over said article. It doesn't strike me as a particularly subtle tactic, and therefore I fully accept Councillor Smith's version, and it begs the question as to which member did do it. That is not for me to decide and to adjudicate on. That would be, as you say, Councillor Smith, for the monitoring officer. So if there is any member with evidence, then they need to submit that to the monitoring officer, but we are not going to hear baseless slurs against one another here. There's been a request to take each individual item and the vote on whether or not to go into part 2 individually. I will muse on that for a moment more whilst I hear from Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chairman. And I would just like to point out to Councillor Smith that if someone had rung him up saying, can you give me a quote on the Part 2 item, then the correct response, I suggest, would have been, no, I can't because it's confidential. And by the way, where did you get that information?
That is for
However,
each individual councillor to decide how they do that.
That is my suggestion, but I would, through you, Chairman, I would also invite Councillor Smith to confirm that if the committee votes that we go into Part 2, that he will therefore not make any further comments on any other items that are in Part 2 outside of the meeting.
Councillor Simon, put yourself on mute and behave. We've already talked about this. It is not for you to dictate which way a member votes or what a member says. It is for each individual elected member to do that. So let's wind it in and let's move on to the vote on whether or not, as we move on to item 10, the lease investment opportunity, we move to protect the taxpayer into Part 2. So if I can ask members to unmute on the vote to exclude the public and the press. Councillor Smith, how do you vote?
In favour.
Councillor Brown.
In favour.
Councillor McGovern.
I'm always reluctant to do this and always only do it for the most relevant and crucial reasons, usually concerning commercial reasons. In favour.
Councillor Baggott.
Well, there's the hypocrisy coming from your side. Against.
Okay, Councillor Headley.
Against.
Councillor Sullivan.
Against.
Okay, I vote in favour, so the motion is carried. Can I ask that the YouTube recording is now turned off?